It's a guy who turned his life around. The guy came from a place that I know, the place that I still visit, and I probably shouldn't, but I know it. And he's turned his life around and managed to help lots of people do the same for them. So I've got a lot of time. He's a founder of something called the SOS project, and I'm going to get to him in a little while. First, let me just say, one of the jobs that Junior's going to have: give me a local story, give me a story that he thinks Londoners should know, and something to lift the spirits of Londoners. Certainly, right up there. Junior's smart. One of my favourite interviewees of all time. How are you, Junior?
Hello. Hi, Eddie. I'm all good, How are you?
I'm all right. I mean, I was keen to get you on, and I've been asking, but Ella doesn't like you. Our producer doesn't like you for some reason. Uh, the thing is, right, most of the people go for it, but I'm talking nonsense, and you don't pay me any mind. It's like I'm at home with my wife and my mum. It's not good, Junior. Anyway, I've asked Ella for a while because there's so many stories before we get to yours. Um, but you have to look quite hard for them that indicate they're letting people out of prison early. They're making all sorts of compromises in terms of sentencing. The jails are full, aren't they, Junior?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's kind of it's a little bit shameful on us. The reoffending rates are so high for incarceration. The reoffending rates are still quite high, and yeah, we just continue, it seems, to do what doesn't work. And it's not like there aren't better examples out there. There's loads of them. There's loads of other countries that are doing it
Not vote
better.
winner. No one's voting for Junior Smart. It's not a vote winner, is it? It's not. It's not a vote winner, and therefore, all the things that you and I campaign for on and off air, and all the things that I can see. Yeah, you're right. Reoffending, trying to get upstream to stop people from committing the crimes in the first place, having them do great work in the prison, so the rehabilitation is a thing. It doesn't make sense to me, if I'm honest with you. So it does. It makes no sense at all. Except if is somebody making money out of people going to prison?
Well, unfortunately, if we look across the pond, we've seen what happens when, incarceration becomes industrialized. And I think, unfortunately, America is an example of what happens when companies that can actually have shareholders in terms of the amount of stock that is people that going into prison is. I just think that would be completely self-defeating for us, and it's something that we don't need to do.
Why don't you answer the question that I get from my listeners all the time? What are you talking about, Ed? Just build more prisons.
If I told you that you could actually stay in Eton for less than it costs to put someone in prison, what would you say?
I said to you, I said there's a lot of people I've seen that come from Eton that deserve to be in jail. Or is that not what I'm supposed to say?
You're not going to be a politician. You're not going to be a politician.
Clearly not. Clearly, I think that ship has sailed. But we talk about this prevention is better than cure. And I don't know, but people have said that economists don't look at it like that. If you're looking at the public purse, you can imagine what the Daily Mail or the Sun are going to make out of taking children from an inner city school and taking them on holiday somewhere so they can see different cultures. You can see what they make out of restorative justice or people painting people's houses. You've heard the hard time community services got. So all the things that actually do work, that they get beaten up for it.
So one of the things, right, if I just share a quick story with you, right, when I never really, as you know, I left school without one single GCSE whatsoever, but I remember a teacher saying to me, if there's ever a reason that we need to study history, it's so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, right? That was one of the things that, one of the few things that stuck with me. And when we think about...
Apply it.
Yeah, so what we know here is that it hasn't worked. The current systems haven't worked. Locking up people for longer hasn't worked. It's costed us more. And we've just come through this massive thing since, like, I think like 2009, when they started having these austerity measures, cost cutting exercises for one reason or another. And what we know is, you can't take money out of the services that those people that are dependent on those vulnerable people, those families that are dependent on those services, they just reappear in the service later on. So, for example, one of the big things that we saw, massive cuts to council incomes. Like, look, loads of councils have become bankrupt. They had to make the decision that many of the families are making of how you're going to keep the lights on at night, what services are you going to keep. Unfortunately, mental health services was one of the first things that are cut because it's quite expensive. Then now recently, over the last 2 years, you heard the police saying, well, actually, we're not going to investigate emotional well-being cases anymore.
It's taking up too much of their time.
Absolutely. But then if you look at the prisons, the correlation has been that there's been a mass increase in terms of the population in prison that have got mental health issues. So basically, those people are now ending up in custody where they shouldn't even be. You cannot say to me, it's okay that someone's had trauma to put them in a trauma environment. That's not going to help anyone.
Nevertheless, if their trauma caused them to mug my mum, then they need to go to jail, don't they?
Well, no. Well, the reality is,
I'm giving you Junior. The reason I love you is I'm giving you. It's not what I think. Yeah, let's just do that in case there anybody listening who's never heard two black guys debate. Right? It's not that. It's not that. I'm not. But I have to put another point of view. If my mum had been mugged, I would want that toe rag put in jail, and I don't care whether they get rehabilitated. I don't really care, and I think that seems, and I know it's the lowest denominator, but it seems to me to be how our judicial system is functioning when it is functioning.
Unfortunately, and I mean, this is the system that we're working with. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where you can have somebody say, look, I've experienced domestic violence. Look, I've got gambling addiction. Look, I'm experiencing trauma, and we've just got one solution and say, hey, let's put you in prison. That's your solution.
Just bear with me, and I knew this was going to happen. I said to Ella, if you're going to have him on, we have to make time, right? Is it more important than the 7 million people waiting on lists to be treated by the NHS? Is it more important than people are shoplifting now and things like Calpol are going to be taken? Is it more important than adult social care? Is it more? Do you see what I mean? There are a whole list of things that, from where I sit, I almost ignore them now because it's so utterly and entirely soul destroying. I try to do a show that kind of gives you something to aspire to lift up now. But when we're looking at stuff, you can see how somebody who's committed a crime gets characterized and categorized in quite a low place, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. But if we, one of the things that we can honestly say is that there's legislation against everything. There's legislation against you shouldn't use violence against a person. There's legislation that says actually even, you shouldn't be dumping sewage into our rivers. But actually how that plays out is people say, you know what, come get me. Let's see what the chances are like. So it's not a lack of enforcement. It's not a lack of enforcement that's causing this. It really isn't. And, even if you look at, and the police, and I say this with absolute, I've worked with some fantastic police officers, social work, like people on the front line. These are people that are the backbone of our society, and legislation isn't making their job easier. So the police, last year, they had 19,000 arrests for people with a bladed article, and yet still the knife crime incidents are huge. We're massive. We're talking about over 50,000 people, harmed with a bladed article. That we have to be thinking about, okay, like as the same thing for everything else, like what is driving it? Here's the thing. I've never heard a young person say, oh, you know what, there's more police outside doing stop and search let's quell the beef, let's not harm each other anymore. That's not what's going to happen. And
But
you
surely,
know,
as the dad of as the dad of two boys, surely the idea that you might get stopped might act as a deterrent.
it's one of those things where um if we it's one of those things of that nobody wants a blunt tool that's going to capture innocent young people as well as those that are guilty. I've sat down with victims. I've sat down with victims and their families. And when I've said to them, what do you think the solution is? Do you think the solution is that we just increase this? Do you think the solution is that there's this tool here, blunt as it is, that we capture anyone? And you know what they've always told me, Eddie? No, Jay, I just want the one person that was going to harm my child to be caught or to be arrested. I don't want innocent children caught up in that. And this is the discussion that I fail to hear in terms of a narrative from anyone else.
We'll do it. But, I have, because I've been doing this show and because I've been talking to you, I have kept he's going to be 15 on the 7th of May. And he doesn't have TikTok, and now we're having a nightmare because the kids only send themselves messages through Snapchat, and I don't want him to have that. I don't put his face on social media. He doesn't have a bank account. I don't give him money, and I am wrong. I know that I am wrong, but I'm just trying to hold on. And now I'm having to have conversations with him about, right, you're going to get somebody try to take your phone at some point. You're going to get the police stop you at some point. And I hate having those conversations. I hate having them, but I know the reality of life is that, I'm not going to be able to be with him all the time. And they're going to be challenging moments. And the idea that he would have an experience and think that he had to carry something in order to protect himself, I just have nightmares about it. You're going to have to come in and we're going to have to do it properly, because there are lots of people who listen, who talk about the value of trainers, the value of money, capitalism, how we can show interest in our children. My number one thing, which is that whoever the next mayor of London is, more mentors. More people willing to spend time with young people to show them this isn't the way. I can't understand why they don't. Anyway, sorry. I'm not campaigning to be mayor of London. As you said, I have no politics in me. There's none. It's too much. Right, your first story, Junior. For goodness sake. Your first story, please.
Okay. So, it's really touching upon where we've just sort of come from, really. We've just had, sadly, over this week, two murders. The young, one of the young kids just that really got to me was a young kid called Isaac Brown. If you see the picture of this, I believe in every single child. I'll always side with the child.
Some of them touch you. Some of them, it is what it is, Junior. Some of them touch you in a different way.
Yeah, and and it's not this isn't even something to say, but also what got me was two people have been arrested and charged. One of them is only 13, the other is 17, and it's just tragic. We lost another life. I think that person's just been named, and it's really gutting. It
still hurts you, even though it's what you do for a living. It still hurts.
Oh yeah, you know what? We can never. I think the biggest problem that we could ever be is become desensitized to this,
but people
or to see it as another person's problem.
There's a guest on Eddie's show who goes, "There's another weekend, another killing in London." Who's surprised by you saying that? We have become desensitized to it.
Yeah.
That's why when it happens to women and girls, that's why we react the way we are, because that's not what Sarah Everard, and we're not used to that, and that's what makes us go, "Oh my God!" The other stuff we say, "Oh, it's a Monday morning. Ed, are we going to do this killing? There was a killing," and you go, "Oh gosh." It's really, look, as I say, you're going to come in, but when you come in or when you come on, I don't want to do the problem, because you and I do the problem a lot. Let's do solutions. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, not
I'm
a problem.
really not interested in traumatizing myself or anybody who's listening. But when I speak to parents about following their children to parties, waiting outside the party, sometimes being the
That's
security at the party, when I talk to people,
yeah.
there's real fear about, whether the children will come home and how their children are functioning. So this is something that I think we can do. Right, let's do your second story, please.
Okay, let's talk about, so ironically, we're talking about, if we're talking about the knife edge or violence, there is actually something that I really wanted you to know about, and that's in terms of the work we've been doing in terms of prevention. Like when we think about the interventions, what can be done about it, it falls really for us into two real kind of angles. Well, actually, three if you think about training for professionals. But I wanted to talk about just briefly about the work we've been doing in
Who's
schools.
we? Who's
And
we? Who's we?
so SOS is like, so our
And
stats have
SOS,
gone live,
let's do this properly, please. SOS
Okay,
is an off branch of what?
it's a SOS Plus, so it is an off branch of the project I developed at St Giles. It uses trained ex-offenders to deliver one-to-one support, and there's been two great things that we've been
Well,
doing.
hold
So
on, you're
one of them,
going too fast.
okay,
This is
sorry.
singularly the most important thing that we've talked about. Why is St Giles important to you?
St Giles as an organisation is just amazing. There's lots of organisations that say that they do work in this field. If I gave you an example, I was a serving inmate, and they, I kept writing them. I kept, politely getting the heads of education to sort of like email them and sort of say to them, look, I've got this idea. Because I was touched. When I was in custody, I started to see like that it was almost like the age limit of the, so when we was involved, there was sort of like rules to this, and it was like the age limit was just getting younger and younger and younger, and the victims were getting younger, and it appalled me. So I really wanted to do something around that, and St Giles just kept coming up, and in the end, we got them into their this is how good they are. They came into the prison to see me, and obviously I had to sit the interview with St Giles for the job, but I landed the job before I was even released, and
What did
that
that
was.
hope give you, fella?
Hmm?
What did that hope give you?
Oh, it was incredible, but the incredulous thing is that lots of people were telling me that it was a bad idea. I learned, and what was really powerful for me then was it was like, hang on a second. So when I committed my crimes, I didn't speak to anybody. I just went ahead and do it. And then when I'm trying to do something positive, people are sort of saying, no, it's not a great idea. And I'm sort of like on the fence about it. So I said, you know what, I've got to try. I said, at least I said to myself, at least if I just give it a shot 100% for a year, whatever happens, happens. But I'm not going to let it go without giving it a best shot. At the end of the first year, none of the people we'd worked with had reoffended at all. And then all of the naysayers, all of the people that thought I shouldn't be trusted, because, a lot of people were saying, why put me in such a position? It should never go to an ex-offender. Ex-offenders can't be trusted. It was seen as very risky. But yeah, all of them, they all, ended up for one reason or another having to eat their words. And that's history. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
in
but
2000.
just bear with me. I'm going to let you tell your second story. I know that one of the things that I've found when I listen back is
Mm,
that what I think of you know what I think of what you do, because it's difficult to turn your life around. But new people and more people are listening all the time, Junior. So I'm not trying to make you relive trauma or anything like that.
it's all right.
It's important for me that they understand why we're talking in the way that we're talking, and where you've come from. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
there'll be lots of parents now who are really worried. A mate of mine just showed me a video, and if I've got to be honest with you, the video touched my soul. The video is of somebody serving a very long stretch, a
Mm,
28-year stretch. And the video is of that person going to their mother's funeral
mm,
in the handcuffs. Now, I don't know if
mm,
you've seen it, but I've seen it 4 or 5 times in my life now. And there's a different kind of pain for me with that. That God bless the prison service, they've allowed the person out. But when you see the handcuffs, sometimes one on each side, and then two officers stationed at the door, and then I mean it's a massive thing, isn't it? But you are going to your mother's funeral in handcuffs. That's a big thing for me. I'll come back. Let me do your second story, and then we get your uplifting story. Because you always bring me down, Junior. For goodness sake, man. Let's find out what's happening on London's roads. I think it's Billy.
You'd